Hey, Randy here. Thank you for clicking into the sermon for this week. I hope we can be a benefit or a blessing to you as you watch and listen. And our prayer is that Jesus would become more real to you than ever before. God bless you. Thank you. She'll take that. Jeff, thank you. Pastor Jeff, his family's down at main campus. He has been hanging out with us, and so it's kind of created some logistical issues for them. But he has been committed to us and has brought such a great level of professionalism and eyes and also attending staff meetings. So Jeff, thank you. Publicly, I want to tell you thanks for giving as you have to this congregation and to me. Teen Challenge guys, thank you. Where are you guys that just led worship? Yep, thank you for come. Yeah, man, appreciate you guys so much. Lisa, welcome. Let's welcome Lisa to our stage today. Lisa, I've been telling people you've been a marriage and family therapist, and I have been lying. It's not the first time I've lied, but you need to correct me.
We can work on that.
Yeah, what are you? And talking to that stick.
I am a licensed professional counselor.
Okay, and your background is, like you've worked with everything from addictions to...
Correct. Individuals, families, children, teens, adolescents. I did crisis work. I was a clinical coordinator for Impact Mobile Crisis teams and suicide prevention. And so I've been everywhere from somebody in with a 360-degree view of the valley to crack houses at 3 a.m., on Buckeye and 15th Avenue. So done it all.
We were friends during those years, and you would go all night long in vans and just be called out at any moment and find yourself in the craziest situations.
True.
You've got a master's degree in life, really, in all of that. Thank you for sharing. I told people, I hope this doesn't embarrass you too much, but if the day that Judy and I need help, you're going to be the girl we call, because I appreciate you, love your heart, you love Jesus, you love the family. I love the family. And so in this talking about dealing with or helping with the impossible child, I thought today would be a good day for me to bring more of a pastoral and my former 20 years as a youth pastor and dean of students at a college, and then you're bringing more of the counseling angle. I thought we might be a good team in this, and so thank you for joining me.
You're welcome. Thanks
today.
For having me.
Yeah. So the first thing that I think we both agreed on that would be a great place to start is I wrote down, love the student relentlessly and discipline them appropriately. What's that mean to you?
I think first and foremost is that God commands us to love God and then love one another. So I think that is what we are to model ourselves after and to just emanate and God's love overflow out of us. Discipline is one of our jobs. Feeding our kids and clothing our kids, discipline is one of our jobs, but we don't want them to think of us constantly as a disciplinarian. So I want them to share God's love with our kids.
Okay, I've found Philippians 1, 9, and 10 helpful in this. It says, "And this I pray, that your love may abound still more and more in knowledge and in all discernment, that you may approve the things that are excellent, that you may be sincere without offense till the day of Christ." So the idea of love more and more and more. Knowing the difference between discipline and punishment is, from a youth pastor's perspective, was huge. Punishment, the punitive... punishment comes out of anger. Punishment comes out of frustration. Punishment reflects me and my feelings towards my child more than discipline.
Right. And punishment is a reaction, usually. So I'm upset about something, I react. I want to respond. I want to be thoughtful about my discipline. I want to think through it. What's most appropriate? Discipline needs to be swift, right after the infraction of the rule, right? And it needs to be appropriate to the rule that was broken. So lots of times you'll hear people say, all right, you're grounded forever. And then they'll come back and they'll say, well, that was stupid because now I have to take them everywhere, right? So,
oh, yeah.
But that was me
Unintended
reacting in the moment.
consequences, yes.
Exactly. And really important not to say, well, wait till your dad gets home from his trip in a week, he'll discipline you, right? I want my kids to respect me. I want them to know the rules in advance and appropriate consequences that may come as a result of their behaviors. So the discipline thing really needs to be well thought through, and so important that all parties who are guardians of the kids, parents, step-parents, grandparents, family members, are consistent with that discipline.
That step-parent thing probably is really easy, isn't it?
It is tricky, and not many people do it well. It's something that people really struggle with. It's very complicated.
Very complicated. 2, let them see God work in your life. Maybe this is more me than you, but if you have something to add to it, I'd love for you. Allow them to see the tension in your own life, that they'll also try to see God's provision in your life as well. I found Matthew 6, therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. So the idea of sheltering, isolating our kiddos with the tensions in our life for the purpose of protecting them, but they don't see the struggles and see God's resolution in those struggles. And now, of course, there's different levels of appropriateness. You know, if they're 9, it all has to be appropriate, and I think that's common sense. But why is it that as a parent, I don't want to let my kiddo into the tensions in my life?
Well, lots of times we think we're protecting them from that, right? And we don't want kids seeing terrible arguments. But we want them to see what real life is and how God intervenes in our lives, and share with them the things that I'm worried about this or I'm frightened about this, but I trust that God is faithful. He's always been faithful. He fulfills his promises, and I trust that he's here in the middle of this and that he's going to guide us and give us direction and provide.
I discipled a man many years ago, 20 years ago, and he and his wife were struggling, and he said he never saw his parents even disagree, not to mention argue. And they would go behind closed doors and they would come out. And I thought that was great at first, and then I thought that might be a disfavor.
Sure, definitely, because how do they know then how to resolve conflict, right? So they're screaming and yelling, or someone ignores somebody or gives them the silent treatment. I see all sorts of dysfunctional ways that people interact with one another or communicate poorly or don't communicate at all. But the importance of them seeing how we handle life's disappointments and frustrations and things with other people, interactions with other people, and they need to see how we resolve that conflict. What is a healthy way to do that? Because they're going to have that. We're not protecting them from anything. If we don't show them how to do that in a healthy way, then they're going to leave our homes and they're not going to know how to do it. So we want to give them guidance on that.
All behavior is purposeful. Proverbs 19, many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. Their job as a student, particularly as a student, but child too as well, I guess, their job is to hide their pain, because it takes maturity to allow that pain to come out in conversation, because we're wanting to protect ourselves. But our job as a parent is to be a student of our parent, and to get into their life and get into their heart, look past the behavior of what's going on, because those are just ways to distract or deflect, and get into their heart and find out what's going on. How hard is it for a parent to not focus on the behavior and versus looking past the behavior and looking into the heart and finding out what's going on? And what's that take? Just courage, or does it take more than courage?
It really takes, and you're going to talk about this a little bit later, Randy, we'll talk about this, that spending time with them, getting to know what's going on with them, what's happening with their friends and their dynamics. We have no idea what they're up against at school, right? Is there bullying going on? Are things happening at school? I spend some time on some of the high school campuses, and the kids are yelling profanities at one another, and, you're stupid, you're ugly, and we don't know. They absorb that. They internalize that. So lots of times when their behaviors are happening, or we see them being angry or irritable or lashing out, or not interacting with us, there's something underneath that. So I do a lot of work with trauma. I'm extensively trauma trained, and so I do a lot of work with people with trauma. And what we see is the symptoms of what's going on underneath. So anger is a secondary emotion. Underneath that anger is fear, frustration, hurt. So when I see somebody lashing out or misbehaving, my thought is, what's going on underneath here? What's fueling that? Where is that coming from? And we don't know, and they're not going to have those conversations with us unless we spend that time getting to know them, being with them where they're at. Not you come to me where I'm at, right? I need to be involved with you. So, when Randy and our kids were younger, I have a son and a daughter who are now grown, and our son, the way I connected with him and had those conversations with him was I'd be up at, midnight, 1 in the morning playing video games. I am terrible at video games, but that's how we connected,
You're also terrible about staying up all night,
That's
too.
true. He would laugh at me, and
Yeah.
but that's when we talk. That's when he'd tell me, "Hey, Mom, last weekend I went to a party and everybody was drinking, and I drove home and I had one drink, or one beer or something." And I'm like, and my reaction was, "Oh my gosh, what?" And I had to like calm myself and kind of talk through that. And those conversations, I'm not. I was pretty protected growing up, and I went to Christian college, and but I know that my kids are going to try things, right? They're trying to figure out who they are, and they're pushing those limits, and I'm holding those boundaries. But I needed to be able to talk through those things with them. If that ever happens again, call us. I don't want you to, have a drink and drive. But he had drank, the least of the whole group. And then our daughter and Randy's daughter.
Tatum.
We probably did this. Tatum was probably along on these, but our time together was midnight drive-throughs at Taco Bell. Was the only thing open at midnight, and the girls would stay the night, and then we would go out at midnight and drive through Taco Bell, and that's what I would talk to them about dating and don't kiss boys until you're 30, and I'd hand them pamphlets on dating violence, and
And
that
Tatum's
was
not even 30.
that
She's married, but that doesn't matter.
Uh-oh,
No.
uh-oh. Yeah. And what's neat, though, is I still get messages like on Facebook from these kids that are grown, right, now in their late 20s saying, "Mom, I need a Taco Bell run. I need to talk."
That's cute.
But, and I wanted to be in bed, but I knew that I needed to meet them where they were at, and that was our opportunities to kind of know what's going on in their lives.
One of the things I wrote here that could probably be its own point is help them attach words to their pain. I think of the Psalms, and when my heart's in anguish, I open up the Psalms and I pray those back, and I use David's words, and his words are often way better than my words, and I resonate with his words, and I attach those words to my feelings, and then I offer them in prayer, and there's this connection going on, but it all happens through words. Adults have a hard time attaching words to their feelings. And in counseling situations, at least my pastoral counseling sessions, there's something magical that happens when I help them with those words and they come out and they're on the table, sometimes in vomit form. But then health follows. Am I making any sense?
Totally. And that's a lot of the trauma work that I do. What happens is we have these things and these messages that we get. And when I'm young, I'll give you an example. So I was working with someone for a while and worked with the family and worked with the teens. And then one of the parents said, I think I have some work I need to do myself, right? Because they saw the work happening and progress and movement as I was working with some of the other family members. And they shared with me that at 3 years old, they were in their home, living with a grandparent, the family was at the time, and Dad poked his head in and said, "Hey, pick up your toys, we're getting ready for dinner." And this little person started, picking up their toys, and sure enough, they got distracted by one and started to play again, and pretty soon they yelled for dinner, and the little girl went to dinner, and after dinner, there was a big fight between Mom and Dad, and what she remembered is hearing the door slam and the car drive away. She never saw her dad again.
Wow.
And in her mind, what do you think happened? Why did Dad leave?
Because the toys.
She didn't pick up her toys. I was a bad girl. I didn't pick up my toys. And here she is, maybe 47 years old,
Wow.
with her own children, struggling with some, children and teen issues, but a lot of that was her own stuff coming to the table as a parent. And coming to that realization of that shame message that I carried, I'm a bad girl. I'm not worthy of being loved. One of the people that's supposed to love me in the world the most left because I wasn't a good girl, right? And so here as an adult, that message still plays in my mind. And it affects how I see myself. It affects how I see other people in the world. It affects whether I believe that I'm worthy of love or worthy of being happy in this life. It affects my worldview. It affects my ability to trust, my ability to share. So once we do that work, and it's really intensive, deep work, and I have to give kudos to people who are willing to do that tough work, right? Because I want to come and say, here's my identified problem. It's a teenager. And usually when we look back, the teenager's just reacting or just caught up in this environment that we've created as a parent. And lots of times with the best of intention, right? I think I'm loving my child, so I give them everything. And what I don't realize is I'm cutting them off at the knees because my message to them is then, you can't do it yourself, so I'm going to do it for you, right? So just understanding the importance of the words and being able to identify those things and verbalize those things. And like you said, sometimes it's extremely emotional. It's extremely intense, but there's a lot of years of wounds and a lot of years of trying to push that down and busy myself so I don't have to deal with those negative thoughts that pop into my head.
Hearing all this makes me so glad I'm a perfect parent.
Thank goodness, Randy.
You're welcome. Create a consistent boundaries unique to them. So be a student of your student. Know them well. Proverbs 27, be diligent to know the state of your flock and attend to your herds. This just doesn't apply to the church or community. It applies to the family. I wrote down, it's good for children to have boundaries. If these boundaries are spacious enough to allow them a sound development, the children will recognize the boundaries are an expression of love and care. So consistent boundaries, consistent's key word, and what's appropriate for them. So our 3 kiddos all had different boundaries. One was pushing all the boundaries. One, and really the other 2 were just kind of more of a homebody or sports, which is fine. It's just we can't give them the same boundaries. That's ridiculous.
So there are certain boundaries that are absolutes, right? So they did a study and they built a new school and they left it all open. So I had all this great fun equipment, teeter-totters and jungle gyms and sandboxes, and they told the kids, go run and play and jump and climb. Outside of the school area was like a forest area, trees and sticks and rocks and things. And what they found was that the children stayed right next to the school. Even though there were all these fun things for kids to do out there, there was this sense of unsafety and didn't feel secure out there. Then they went in later and they put in a chain link fence, right? So still could see all the trees and rocks and things and still had the same toys. And then they found that the kids no longer stayed next to the school. They went all the way out to the fence. They climbed on the fence. They stuck their arm through the fence to get a stick to hit another kid. They just had to take it down off the fence. They explored. They met other kids. They interacted. And so the significance of having boundaries. So as parents, we need to set boundaries, these healthy boundaries, but within those boundaries give options and choices, right? So I may not let you go to that party with those kids because I know that the parents party too, or either not going to be there, or I heard that there's a lot of, drug and alcohol activity there. But I'm going to take you and 3 friends to the movies, or you can have a slumber party, or you guys can go, do race cars somewhere, or see Star Wars or something. So I'm going to give you options, healthy options, but with our kids, always absolutes are safety, moral, and legal, right? We don't budge on those. So I give a lot of choices. I have tolerance for certain things, but there are also certain things that there's zero tolerance, and having those boundaries, but healthy choices within those boundaries.
Boy, it sounds to me like the blended family, this is where extra tension is created, because if I'm going to parent let's say we've blended our family, and you bring 2 kiddos, I bring 2 kiddos. Your view of my kids, my view of your kids, the other becomes suspicious of the other. That's just complicated. I'm just thinking about the families that I know and love. That's not easy, is it?
No, it's not. And there's conflicting information out there, and you can find something to support,
Right.
whatever your belief is. But that the step parent never steps in, never has any say-so in
Right.
that, right? And then there's the others that, yes, the step parent should be very involved. And so it goes back to that consistency, right? I'm going to hold the same boundaries for your kids that I do my kids. And the importance in this especially is being unified, right? The 2 parents being unified in what our decisions and our boundaries are, what the consequences are. Kids are smart, if they know one parent usually says no, of course they're going to go to the other parent, right? So we want to say, if a kid comes to us about something and I'm not really sure about that, or how my, spouse is going to feel about that, my response is going to be, you know what, let me talk to Dad. We'll talk it over and we'll get back to you, right? So being unified in that, whether it's biological parents, step parents, neighbors, whoever is taking care of the kids.
So you and Dave, me and Judy, we have our own work to do to get on the same page. Been married forever, so on. Then you add another couple, the mom and the stepdad. So you control what you control. You control your family unit.
Right.
I'm sure the stepmom doesn't have any control over the other family, probably less than anyone in the world at times. So you control what you control.
Exactly. So lots of times, it'll be very different things going on in the other home, right? If I am in a Christian home, you can tell I'm at True Arizona and it's 76 degrees and I'm all wrapped and bundled up, right? The snowbirds are in shorts and T-shirts. Yeah, so you can't control what goes on in the other home. All you can do is have a godly home and model what's healthy in your home. And what's interesting? The kids will give you flack, right? If your home is maybe a little bit stricter, a little bit more conservative in your values, but at the same time they're watching. And as they get older, they see the difference. One of the things that Randy had up here earlier was about being sincere, right? Kids will call us on it all the time. You told me I can't do this, but you're doing it. So, that there's that sincerity. And they're watching our actions more so than they're listening to what we say, right? Are those consistent? Is what I tell you in my faith about God acted out in my daily life? Is what I tell you about the rules and right and wrong, am I following those same things, or am I just trying to impose those upon you?
This one's all mine. I don't know if you'll agree with it or not. If not, don't tell me publicly.
I have issue with that one.
Quantity time, not quality. I hear parents lean on quality too much. And they expect, we're going to spend 2 hours together on Saturday. Now we've got to rush into deep conversation, and I need them to spill their heart because I have them from 2 to 4. But it takes students, as a youth pastor, I knew it takes students time. In fact, when you were talking about midnight and 2 in the morning, they're going to open up, particularly students, I don't know about children as much, but they're going to open up on their timetable. And so sometimes it just takes time. And I see dads walking with their kids at Barrett-Jackson this past week for hours, and it's fun, and they're looking at cars, but it's not until the drive home after lunch that the kiddo starts finally opening up. And so quality, of course, quality is great, but sometimes we try to squeeze them into our timetable.
For sure. And it's one of the key things in this area, I'm glad you brought that up, is making that time with my child, that time for them to talk, that time for them maybe to share some of those emotions or those insecurities, is I am responsible for making that a safe place, right? Our home is supposed to be the safest place. So and even as adults, we recognize this. We go out into the world and we do our jobs and we interact with people, and people are, climbing over you and being deceitful to get up that corporate ladder, right? Or to be the fittest mom dropping your kid off at preschool or whatever that looks like, right? And we get beat up all day. And then we come home, and that's where we're supposed to be safest. We can fill ourselves back up emotionally, mentally, physically. That's supposed to be our safest place where we can fill ourselves back up because we get depleted out there in the world. And then we can go out the next day and be our best. But if we come home and home is not safe, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, then I just stay depleted and I just keep getting more and more depleted. And so the importance of spending that time together, whether it's, I have them loading the dishwasher and I pop in and do a few dishes with them and we tell a joke or we, dance a few steps or we, do a few things while we're putting the dishes away, or whether it's staying up in the middle of the night and going to Taco Bell, or it's really making time to sit down and have a long talk about what's going on. But it really is, Randy, it's like on your timeline, especially when we're dealing with like adolescents and teens. Even in counseling, it takes them a while to open up. It takes a while to build that trust with them because they're a little leery of adults, right? So the importance of just being around, being there and being available. And when they want to talk to me, put down the phone, shut off the TV, make that time, make them important, be right at the center of where they're at and be available to talk to them.
Did you see the video of our youth pastor with all the kiddos
Yeah.
at camp? So he's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, because of the holiday, till Monday, quantity. Then our students start opening up to him and Mel and other youth workers because they logged the hours. And some parents, I don't think, quite understand the importance. Camps and retreats are much more than just fun. And, the Young Life Camp and UCYC, they're not about kids having fun. Ultimately, they're about getting them out, connecting with youth workers, thinking and praying, and getting that quantity time. You did that with your kiddos. We tried to do that with ours.
Yeah, I think in that quantity time comes the opportunity for
Yes.
the quality, right? So I was talking with a family yesterday, and lots of times when we're working with kids, like Randy, asked to talk about kids that are difficult or challenging, I see some of the kids from some of the best families, right? They're Christian families. They're committed to their faith. They're involved in positive things. They're involved in their community. They're putting back in. They're involved in ministry. But there's not the time for their kids.
Yeah.
And so then a lot of times that's when you begin to see the behaviors. You begin to see the resistance to anything I might suggest. You begin to see the attitude. You begin to see them withdrawing and isolating, spending all their time in their room, being resentful. And I said to this parent, actually I said to them together to begin with, when was the last time you guys just spent some alone time together? I'm looking for some kind of one-on-one time here. Oh, we do that all the time. When was it? 2 days ago. We went to Target. We went and got your hair cut. We went and I'm like, yeah. And was that quality one-on-one time where I'm just focused on you and we're having fun? No, it was running errands, right? Like how much quality time were you spending when somebody else was cutting their hair? And so it was just doing life, getting things done. So what I asked them to do is every week or every other week, we can start every other week, put on your calendar kind of a date time, 30 minutes, whether we, walk up to the corner and get a donut, whether we sit down and read a children's book together, or we pull out a game of cards and play Go Fish, or, whatever it is. Designate that time, and that kid can see that on the calendar. If something happens during the week, I get my parents uninterrupted time to just talk about what's going on with me. Because what happens is in our day, we get so busy with things that are quote-unquote important, right, that have to get done. All of a sudden, it's been 3 months since I actually sat and had a conversation with my child.
I love donuts.
Great, I'll get you some.
I just got stuck on the word donut, that's all. I heard that.
Yeah, me too.
Open up the lines of clear communication. So instead of saying, how was school, which is the most popular question, what makes you the happiest? What words best describe you? What's the best thing that's ever happened to you? So when you are together, when you are spending that time, open-ended, provocative questions to make them go, I don't know. What can you do that's rare and special? What makes you nervous about being an adult? What makes you excited about being an adult? So questions And these 6 came off of a website, and I just typed in the question, I have one of those Google machines, and opening up conversation with your kids. And there were maybe 500 of them. These are the just top 6. So if we do a little research and a little planning, this isn't that hard.
Right. I have lists that I'll give out to families too. I'll say, there's a list of 100 questions,
Yeah.
getting to know you questions. Pick 5 this week and ask your parents when you're at dinner, these questions. There's a lot of things about your parents that you didn't know, or
Great
things about
question.
their childhood, right? So we kind of make this fun, getting to know you and getting to know each other a little bit deeper. Do you know what their favorite color is, or who their favorite superhero is? It starts out fun, but those are opportunities to deepen those conversations and get to know that person.
Yeah. Empathize before you instruct, Romans 12. Rejoice with those who rejoice, and grieve with those who grieve. The idea of don't give answers too quickly, don't minimize their issues. I don't think we have to worry about, with teenagers, maximize. They're going to bring the drama for us. That's the beauty of teenagers, most of them. But it is empathize before you instruct. Let them feel your heart before you give head instruction. Probably dads probably have a more difficult time. I don't want to just generalize, but as guys, we want to fix those and, oh, that's stupid, do this, and then they feel like this big. Is that correct? This was mine, so that's why I'm asking, can you confirm or deny this point is being legit?
Sure. And we have to think of them age appropriately, right? So everything when they're adolescents and teens is about the friends and fitting in and that sort of thing. So they'll get all dramatic over something and we'll think, oh my gosh, just with the drama. But for them in that moment, that is the most important thing, to sit and listen to them. Big thing, listen, do more listening. Lots of times when parents come to me with adolescent or teen issues, I'll say, okay, Mom and Dad, you're going to come into this session and they're going to get to vent and you don't get to say a word. But, nope, and so I just need to get them used to listening. Number one complaint of adolescents and teens is I don't get listened to. People make decisions for me that affect my life, and nobody hears how it's affecting me, right? People get divorced, people move away with jobs, people have all sorts of things that they make decisions about that greatly affect this person in our life. They don't get a choice about that, right? If I lose my job and the only place I can find a job in another city is we have to go. But I definitely can hear how this is affecting you and support you in that. And so I would say hearing them out more and spending time kind of talking things through. One other thing on that too, Randy, before we go on, is I see a lot in Christian families, and I've seen it in my own families, where Christian families are really rigid about rules, regulations, not letting the kids kind of experience some of the things that are going on in the world. And if we could protect our kids from all of that forever, sign me up, right?
Yeah.
But what happens is we protect them like that, kind of in this little jar, and then what happens is they start to go to school and they see other kids and other families and even other Christian
Or
families
college in
engaging
the
in
dorm
the same
room. Yep.
college.
Yep.
Went to Christian college, it's all there,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
And they don't know what to do with that. So as a Christian parent, I'm going to allow a little bit of some of that stuff in. They might see something in an R-rated movie, and we're going to talk about how God doesn't honor us sleeping with somebody before we're married, or God doesn't want us to smoke weed, even though it was grown from the ground, right? And so it's organic. Yeah, that's the thing I get. It's organic. So having those conversations with them about some of the things that are going on in the world and why we might be believing differently, or why we might act differently than what we see all of our friends doing. So kind of going back to that, listening, knowing what's going on with them, but allowing a little bit of that exposure so that when friends kind of draw them, want to draw them into this stuff with the peer pressure, they can be solid in what they believe and why they believe that and why they don't engage in that, and really confident in what God wants for them in their life.
I think of Romans 12, rejoice with those rejoice, grieve with those grieve. I struggle as a man with intense feelings. It's why my favorite movie is What About Bob? There's not a lot of intense feelings in What About Bob? It's a great Billy Graham Crusade movie, yeah. And so when I think about grieving and rejoicing with a kiddo, it's opening up emotion that I am not comfortable with. And I think Paul is helping that church to understand, experience those feelings, is as intense as they may be with those folks. When I walk into ER, or I walk in to ER with the sheet over their head, I'm not thrilled about the feeling that I'm about ready to experience. But I have to. That's an extreme, but with our kiddos, they are experiencing things, and it's hard for me to absorb those. It takes maturity, and it takes love. And I sometimes wonder if our kiddos wait to see if we're willing to go there or not, too. I don't know. Next one is set realistic expectations. I wrote down that some girls look older than they are. They look older than they actually are, so we expect them to be more mature. Because they look 25 and they're 16, or boys are 18 and look 14, and so we lower our expectations on them. It's going back to being a student of our student.
And I think a big thing about that is expectations. Are they our expectations, or are they really what's best for our child?
Yeah.
A lot of the crisis calls I went on when I was doing crisis work are to Barrett's Honors College at ASU, right? Highly intelligent students, they're all expected to get a 4.7 or higher, and it's the kind of the unspoken, but in order to stay in there, they have to have a certain GPA. It's extremely competitive. Parents have these huge expectations, right? I think there's a list that was like the top, I don't know how many CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. Most of them have like a B, A to C average, right? And so we want them to do their best. But I see so many families, and one of the things that's happening now that we're seeing this trend in is huge numbers of kids, young kids experiencing severe anxiety and depression, right? I have a lot of theories by why that's going on and what's happening in society and the world, but and lots of kids being medicated with psychotropic medications just to function because they're having severe panic attacks, worried about how they're going to do on a test, worried about how parents are going to respond to a report card, worried about if they're going to get into the certain colleges that the expectations are there. So really what happens is when I put that on my kids, I'm not trusting God to put them where they need to be. Who's to say that they can't minister to somebody at the community college? Who's to say that they can't minister to somebody in a in a vocational school? And so really those expectations and really kind of going to God about that and recognizing our kids' strengths and their limitations. My son struggled terribly with math. We had tutors. We worked with him. He'd get good grades and D in math every time, and that was just something he personally struggled. Well, lots of kids do. Yeah. But letting that be okay, knowing that's not their strength, and just supporting them in that.
Yeah. As we wrap up, second to the last, this is probably the most important for me from a pastoral standpoint, is commit to a personal dynamic relationship with God yourself. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding, but acknowledge Him, and He'll direct your paths. This kind of relationship with God is caught, not taught. And some of the most dysfunctional Christian families are the ones that trying to teach it and not trying to help the kiddo catch it. And making Christ the joy of your life, and modeling that healthy relationship with Jesus. I know that kiddo's not going to surpass the spiritual level of a parent until well into adolescence and such. So the parent has placed a cap on that family. And sometimes we just want to, it's pretty hypocritical, I understand, and certainly I've been guilty of it myself, but making my relationship with Jesus primary and watching them come along with that. And being a believer as you are, I'm certain that you have seen that happen, particularly those in full-time Christian work.
Yeah, and I think that's the most important thing we can give our kids, right? Is that faith in Christ. And be honest with them. Like, you asked me that question, I don't know. Let's find out together. Or, you know what, I'm a sinner and I'm human and I make mistakes and I'm sorry, will you forgive me? And just modeling that Christ likeness. And so being careful that that's my main focus and trusting that God's going to help me put the other things in place. Have my kids see me stumble and ask forgiveness, going to them and asking forgiveness if I've overreacted or I've been wrong or I've sinned, and really just going to God, being on my knees. I think back in my family, there were 6 kids, and my mom had been an only child, so she was just trying to, keep her mind together with 6 kids. And my dad, was working a lot, trying to, afford a family of 8. And my parents were believers. I was fortunate to have been brought up in a Christian home, a solid Christian church. But I remember my grandmother on her knees praying for hours at a time for her family.
Wow.
My mom's mom, my dad's dad taught in their Christian church, and I remember him sitting at his table with his Bible open and just reading in the Word and praying. And so I have those really solid memories and foundations of people of faith in my life, and I saw God work through them. And I just pray that I don't get too busy, that I can be that person for my kids and my grandkids.
The whole hour was worth that point, and thank you for sharing that. And that picture of your grandpa is in my mind. I love that. A series like this it's impossible for me to know whether we ever even came close to hitting our intended target. The only way we're going to find out is if you take that communication card. If we blew it and it meant nothing to you, do not write a thing. I am not interested. I'm not. You're more sure of yourself. I have less confidence in me. No, in all seriousness, I want to know how to pray for you. Don't give us names if you don't want us. I want more communication cards than I've ever had in my years here at Arizona Hills. Take them, write them. Tell us what point was the most impacting, so if we ever offer this again, I'll know to make sure that we don't miss that and we capitalize on that. I want to know. This is a sermon, in essence, pushing people to Jesus and drawing our kiddos to Jesus. That's what this is. And I want to know what we did, and then if we gave some practical advice as well. The last point, I think we already touched it, but for those of you that have, you're kind of, what's it called? What is it? OCD, yeah, thank you. That's why you knew that so quickly. Commit to helping your kiddo attach words to their feelings, and I think we already talked about that, Psalm 34. The band's going to come and rock out as we walk out, and I'm going to pray.
Can I add one last point?
Real quickly.
I think you cut this out of my list.
May have.
I'm kidding. And just that fellowship, that is huge. Fellowship with other believers, and have your kids see that. We were so fortunate to be part of our church, part of Bible studies. We spent time outside of that socially with other believers.
Yeah, you did.
Because there, our kids are seeing the Martins were instrumental in our kids spending time with them and them seeing those same values in that Christian home. And I can think of one family after another family after another family, and your pastors and your youth pastors, and praying for them and spending time with them, because the kids are going to be out in the world sooner or later, right? And you want them to see how God worked and people of faith, and the difference between families and people of faith and those in the world that don't have that and they don't know that. And you want them to be able to, like Randy was talking about earlier, rejoice. You want to see those prayers and see God answer those prayers, because those are the things that help build their faith in Christ.
Yeah. And we have small groups that they can join at any time. They can just write down, I want to join a small group, and they can do that. So I'm sorry I deleted that. And that should have been in there. As the band makes their way up here to kind of rock us out of here, I want to pray for you. Who am I praying for? Let me see your hands. Who am I praying for? Yep. I'm praying for you now. God, some courageous parents in this room that raise their hands in front of their peers. And maybe it is the level of tension in their life and in their home that caused that, or just simply the understanding that without Jesus, none of it will be resolved at all. May you, Jesus, create homes that honor you, that members care deeply for each other, and that there's a level of dependence from the top to the bottom. In Jesus' name, amen. May you go with Jesus. May you walk with him, and may you pass the good news of Jesus to your kiddos. If you need prayer, I've got my dear friends over here, the Gillespies. Stop if you want prayer. You can have it right now. It is completely free today. Stop. They want to meet you. Have a good day. Go love Jesus and your kiddos. Bye.